The summer of 2021, June the 4th in Arizona, USA, a temperature is set to 42 degrees Celsius. A fire breaks out which burns 73,000 hectares and destroys 52 buildings. July the 3rd, Beckwourth, California. Temperature is at 36 degrees. Fire burns 42,000 hectares and destroys 33 buildings. July the 4th, Canadian village Lytton is at 33 degrees. The number of fires is 180. 2 deaths appear. A week before the first fires, temperatures reached 48 degrees. July the 8th, Athens, Greece, 34 degrees, 56 fires, residents flee homes, power is cut off. July the 16th, Mersin and Hatay, Turkey, abnormal heat of 39 degrees, flames cover 80 hectares of land. July the 25th, Sardinia, Italy, 36 degrees, 20,000 hectares, 1,500 people evacuated. July the 4th, fires continue to rage in Yakutia, Russia, 34 degrees. The fire will scorch 8.7 million hectares of land by September. As you can imagine, these are not all of the fires that have swept through the world this summer, and fires are the most obvious consequences of global climate change. You should remember from our previous videos that the Earth has warmed by 1.1 degrees on average. But until now, we've missed the important part. On average doesn't mean evenly. The precise global warming looks like this. Somewhere there are patches of 2 degrees and somewhere we are approaching 3 degrees, and there's only one small spot in the entire globe in the North Atlantic where we have even slightly cooled down. But in general, we all warm up. And when we say all, it's downright real. All of us. So even a small increase in temperature leads to colossal consequences.
In the last 40 years, fall temperatures in California have increased about 2 degrees, while precipitation has dropped about 30%.
Longer dry seasons and extreme events like heat waves that synchronize the risk of fire across enormous landscapes.
Climate change is increasing the area burned by the average wildfire, more than doubling it since the 1980s.
Since 1930, 5 of the biggest fires so far, out of the top 10, have been this year.
The year 2020 set an anti-record when 5 of the top 10 in terms of magnitude wildfires in the last 90 years occurred in California, including the number 1. Then the west coast of the United States set anti-records both in the number of fires and the area burned. Here's another great yet terrible infographic. If you were to compile top of the biggest fires on California's soil, here's how much Earth these competitors has scorched in 67 years. But that's the past. Let's get closer to our time. Here's how much land has been burned in 19 years, and 2020 is the absolute record holder, catching up to the 19-year chart in just 1 year. And you don't want to compare it to the past at all. The current one, 2021, fortunately for the US, did not set an anti-record, but demonstrated stability quite confidently. It won't come as a surprise to you, but any event in any country has an economic effect. In other words, everything can be converted into money, even a human life, despite how immoral it may sound. For instance, in Russia, the loss of a single life due to a car crash costs the country 9 million rubles, which is $122,000, and the total economic damage is roughly 4 trillion rubles a year, which is around $50 billion. As you can guess, the effect of thousands of hectares and acres of burning land can also be converted into money, because the real hell on Earth somehow affects the normal course of the economy and life. Let's look again at the area of California's largest fires by year, and the total amount of damage is $148 billion, just under 1% of the nation's GDP. But what if I told you that this amount is not for the entire period that you can see on the screen, and not even for 2020? A colossal sum of $150 billion just for this period, for 2018. But you do remember that these are just the top fires, meaning there are even more acres hidden behind each year. For example, in 2018, there were a total of 8,500 fires that burned under 2 million acres of land. Here's the thing. California itself suffered $102 billion in damages, of which $60 billion were direct damages and healthcare costs, and the remaining $43 billion were a cascading effect in the disruption of 80 industries in the state. What is also important is that another $46 billion went beyond one state and shook up the economy across the country.
While the deadliest wildfires destroyed many houses and other physical infrastructure, the air pollution triggered caused a great burden to people's health. Productivities were therefore reduced due to sickness in California. The slowdown in production caused ripple effects to economic supply chains within California, as well as the other 49 states and internationally.
Estimating fire damage is not easy. For example, this study came out 2 years after the 2018 events and involved scientists from China, the US, Britain, and Norway. It took 2 years to run everything through models that account for damage to power lines, trucking, pipelines, and other infrastructure-dependent industries. And most surprisingly, it turned out that the economic impact was felt in industries and communities far away from the fires. Nearly 1/3 of total losses were incurred outside the fire region. At the time, $443 million was spent to contain the fires, and that was the entire budget of the fire agency for the year. And even that wasn't enough for them. They needed another $234 million. On top of that, 10,000 victims filed claims with insurance companies, and that was another $845 million. So that's how a quick estimate of the fire damage reached $1.5 billion. And that's just what was on the surface. Then, after a while, the media increased the damage estimates. It began to reach $24 billion. But the researchers have calculated an effect that is several times higher. And I'm not talking about the first media estimate.
Efforts to quantify the impacts of specific fires on humans made by researchers, insurance companies, public agencies, and the media have focused on the physical and direct damage to infrastructure and loss of life. But disasters may also have large indirect impacts on economic activities that extend much beyond the location of physical destruction or smoke. Here, we use a combination of models to estimate the economic impacts of California wildfires in 2018, including the value of destroyed and damaged capital, the health costs related to air pollution exposure, and indirect losses due to broader economic disruption cascading along with regional and national supply chains.
All these scientists are pursuing an extremely ungrateful idea. They hope for some reason that officials, after seeing the full effect of economic impact, will start treating fire prevention differently and intensify firefighting efforts. For example, focus fire prevention efforts on areas downwind of major population centers or near critical infrastructure to reduce impact and costs. Or, vice versa, organize so-called prescribed fire, aka controlled burn, where you arrange a small controlled fire to get rid of decrepit and easily flammable plants and then create a dividing line to prevent uncontrolled combustion. You burn a little now so that it doesn't burn a lot later. Well, it sounds beautiful on paper if, in our example, the total damage to the national economy is estimated at $148 billion and the annual budget for the California Fire Department is $442 million, then maybe, just maybe, if you double or triple the funding for spring-summer fire prevention, then you can greatly reduce the damage done from destroyed buildings, stopping the economy and, of course, people's health and lives. So, why did we spend so much time specifically on the California fires of 2018?
Because you're Russian agents. You want to discourage America.
I haven't had the task of making an emotional picture of total hell on earth by listing all the fires in the world. Fires happen everywhere. It's clear that there's a lot of burning and it's on a large scale. Remember what we started this video with, and here's also our personal base of wildfires that we just didn't put in this episode. Just by the example of the economic effects of the California fires, we have gained knowledge that can be transferred to any case in any country. The effect of such global phenomena is very difficult to estimate fully. You remember that at first the damage was estimated at $1.5 billion, then it came to $24 billion, and only 2 years later, through complex models that took into account even out-of-state impacts, we got a whopping $148 billion in damage. And that's with an annual fire department budget of $442 million. We can take this example and transfer it to all other wildfires. We don't have to go far. In 2021, in Yakutia, the fire scorched under 9 million hectares. That's about 22 million acres. Now for comparison, let me remind you that in California in 2018, the fire covered 1.8 million acres, and the damage is estimated at $148 billion. In Russia, on the other hand, the area is 11 times larger, and the latest cost estimate we could find was $22 million. 148 billion. 22 million. 148 billion. 22 million. I understand that you can't make such a blunt comparison. You have to consider the landscape, proximity to homes and infrastructure, and generally the economy of California is much more expensive than Yakutia's. But considering how Russian official statistics work, my opinion is that even if the Americans, who in principle constantly count everything, convert it into graphs, statistics, and models, they even have different top wildfire lists, like the most extensive, destructive, or deadly. If their estimate turned out to be 5 times lower than that of the researchers, it seems to me that the researchers would have estimated the damage from the Yakutia fires dozens of times higher, including the full picture. And yeah, 22 million acres of total scorched earth sounds like a whole lot. By comparison, that's how much of the forest burns in all of America a year. And let's add Yakutia of 2021 to that. Once again, all of America and only Yakutia. And it's understandable why, at the recent climate change conference, Biden acted as a teacher, reprimanding latecomers to class.
The single most important thing that's gotten the attention of the world is climate. Everywhere. From Iceland to Australia, it just is a gigantic issue, and they've walked away. How do you do that and claim to be able to have any leadership mantle? The same with Putin and Russia. His tundra is burning. He's in literally the tundra is burning. He has serious climate problems, and he is mum on the willingness to do anything.
Though Old Man Joe misspoke here, mistaking tundra for taiga, but then it turned out that the tundra can burn too. In general, everything will burn even more often and everywhere. There is no doubt. In 2022, 23, 24, or 25, there will be new anti-records again. and all because of the more frequent heat waves. This is when there is more than 5 days of abnormally hot weather for a particular region.
It is concerning that drier and hotter regional conditions, brought about by global warming, increase the flammability and fire risk of vegetation. This has led to very intense and fast-developing fires. While the local weather conditions play a role in the actual fire behavior, climate change is helping provide the ideal environments for wildfires.
And Russian Yakutia has become a good and at the same time a bitter example. The warming of the Earth by 1 degree Celsius looks tiny, but in fact it makes the periods of abnormal heat that occur once in 10 years increase 3 times, and those that occur once in 50 years 5 times. It means the days of abnormal heat will be happening roughly every 3.5 years and every 10 years respectively, provoking large-scale fires. Well, they won't be happening, they are already happening. Or rather, were happening, because at the moment, we are at 1.1 to 1.2 degrees of average warming of the Earth, which means we are on the way to 1.5 degrees, and by that time an abnormal heat frequency will increase even more, 4 and 8.5 times, meaning that heat waves will occur every 2.5 years and every 6 years. And it will happen soon, well, in 8 years at most. Moreover, all that is going to happen in all 5 possible scenarios. And those to assist the cause will be trees that emit an incredible amount of CO2 after fires. Here's the vicious circle. CO2 causes temperature to rise, which makes heat waves more frequent, which makes fires more frequent, which emits CO2, which causes temperature to rise. And governments must be prepared for the change in balance, because ignoring fires, it turned out, is not economically profitable. Perhaps you could guess what our next video is going to be about. In the meantime, leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video with your friends, and don't forget to check out our Patreon. And I'm the Researcher.